Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Kashrus, presented by the Kashrus Awareness Project in conjunction with Torah Anytime. Today, I am privileged to be joined by Rabbi Menachem Lubinsky, the founder of Lubicon Marketing, the founder of Kosher Today, and the head of Kosher Fest, among your many other titles and accomplishments. Thank you, Rabbi Lubinsky, for being here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So it's very unique to be sitting with you because over the last couple of years since we started Let's Talk Kashrus, I've spoken to heads of kashrus agencies, I've spoken to many Rabbanim Machshirim, but I don't think I've ever spoken to someone who has your perspective in the world of marketing and also in the world of kosher food and the world of kashrus. So I think your perspective on what you could share with our listeners and viewers is very, very interesting. So just as a form of introduction, tell us a little about your background and then how you got into the kosher food industry.
Okay, my background is basically in marketing, and I opened my own, after being in Aguda for over 13 years as an employee and a second in command to Rabbi Moshe Sherer, Zechrein Livrocha. I opened my own agency, which evolved into Lubicon. And this was about 1984, 85. And there was no such thing as a kosher food industry at that point. There were the very small kosher purveyors that everybody knew about. And then there were the big guys who had hashgacha, but very few of them. So I've watched the kosher industry grow up literally from its infancy over the last 35 years. At a time when you could basically count the number of kosher food products on one sheet. Yeah. I think by 1987, when we started Kosher Fest, we counted about 16,000 kosher products. Today, if you count all the ingredient products and everything, you're talking about over 1 million and more.
Wow.
And a supermarket which had maybe 100 linear feet of kosher. Maybe they had a yahrzeit candle, some matzahs, grape juice, at best. Today, it's a whole different world because we have such a thing as a kosher supermarket, which means that everything in a store is kosher. And I'm talking about stores that can compete with some of the major chains, stores that are 25, 30, and even 50,000 square feet. So it's a whole new world for the kashrus consumer. And during that time, the level of kashrus also grew up. The standards became much more tougher. People that went into hashgacha in the early days were not necessarily the people who went to kollel or went to yeshiva. Today, there's Elche Junge Light, and I, for one, feel that they are the unsung heroes. The mashgichim, the people who made kashrus happen, the thousands who are out there in factories all over the world. People, we had Loyalena, we had Mashgiach who was assassinated, killed in Mumbai. We survived the COVID. But all this time, what drove kashrus to this new level is that the manufacturers of kosher produced a high quality product. The packaging was much different than it was. And the opportunities for marketing it became vast. Kosher Fest was an opportunity to showcase kosher products, only kosher products. I remember a time when people used to shop in a major supermarket and had to ask the manager, where do you have kosher products here? Obviously, today we don't have that problem.
Right.
So, you know, it's like watching a baby grow up.
Wow.
It was a fascinating experience to watch kashrus grow up in every respect. And not only that, the consumer grew up. The consumer learned to appreciate quality products. They learned to appreciate change and innovation.
Right. And I think also the consumer became more sophisticated. So along with the growth of the industry, the Jewish palate became more complex and demanded more.
Right. I mean, you know, we went from just having cholent and herring to to a vast array of products. I could say this, that watching the kosher food industry grow up was a great feat for the Frum community. Because just like as we were developing our yeshivas, and just as we were developing our Moistes HaChesed, for the first time, at least in the last 15 years, I mean, the big supermarkets only started in 2008.
You're saying the big kosher supermarkets.
The big kosher supermarkets. It kind of gave us the chizuk and the power, the purchasing power within our own community. So when something like COVID happens, we had our products. While the rest of the world was short on products, we had 6 brands of kosher mayonnaise, so that we didn't run short. And I mean, not to forget the fact that it's given parnasa to so many thousands of people,
right,
who otherwise would not have had parnasa, and that in itself was an injection into the community.
I'm curious to hear from your vantage point also your observing of the growth of the kashrus industry, because you mentioned, let's say in the 80s there were 16,000 from products. Today there are over 1 million, or whatever the number might be. I think you would say the same thing about the number of kosher certifying agencies and the size of those agencies. Speak about that for a moment.
Yeah, well, the number of kosher agencies today is already in the thousands. We're no longer in the hundreds. But what drove that is that, first of all, when we outgrew being a New York phenomenon, when people used to relate kashrus, they used to relate it to New York. But today, we're in every town and communities that are continuously growing. I mean, who thought 25 years ago that we would have major kashrus presence in places like Houston? So everything had a link. I mean, the fact that the community grew, so the stores grew, the kashrus grew, the producers were forced to produce more products, the hashgachas were forced to bring in more hashgachas, and the number of mashgichim today who are trained, for example, I wouldn't even venture a guess as to how many there were back then, 35 years ago. And one small thing. 35 years ago, I have it on my file. I went to a Sforum store and I found on the shelf 7 or 8 kosher cookbooks. 7 or 8. If you go today to a Sforum store, I think you could find over 100, and that's only what he displays. Imagine, and then there's online and whatever.
And not only that, I could say from my years at Art Scroll, not only are there so many cookbooks, but cookbooks are the best-selling item in the world of Judaica.
Right.
So
I know a lot of mashgichim know this story of a newlywed couple are allocating space for this forum, and he's putting in his shas and he's putting in his shulchan aruch and everything, and she says, "Wait a minute, where's my space for my cookbooks?"
Exactly.
So that's the world that we live in today.
Exactly, no question about it.
Yeah.
You're talking about the change. I'm thinking back to the 80s and 90s, when in order for someone to, let's say, keep Yashon, they really relied on Rabbi Herman and his guide to Chadash. Today, the guide is very helpful, but there's such an explosion of awareness that today many products will have stamped on it, Yashon, things like that. And I don't know if I'm wrong, tell me if I am, to say that the majority of items today are actually Yashon because the consumer demanded it. That's also just one example.
It's not so much that they demanded it. Yes, they demanded it, but it became part of the kosher standard.
Right.
And so much so that the companies were forced to put it on the label if they wanted to compete properly.
Right.
So there's no question. I mean, you could talk about kosher wine, the mavushal and not mavushal, and all of that. What happened to kashrus, I think it's a model for any industry. The way we grew. And we had a very receptive audience. That's the most positive thing. In marketing, you always have to be targeted. You always have to target your audience. Our audience was ready for it. Our people wanted it. When you talk to young people today, they know more about food than certainly what their parents knew. Their parents had a set number of items that they knew how to make, applesauce. But today, a newlywed, sure, she can go out to a restaurant once in a while, the couple can go out, but she also has to be a gourmet chef.
I would say also, though, I'm curious to know from your standpoint also, as the industry has grown, so the standards of kashrus have risen, but in a certain way that's counterintuitive, because one might think that as the industry is growing and it's getting more sophisticated and there's more complex machinery and things like that, really, in a certain way, certifying items and doing so across the globe in very, very complicated factories would be more difficult, not the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, a mashgiach today has to know Shulchan Aruch, of course, but he also has to know technology. He has to understand the way a machine works in a factory. He has to understand how labor works, how the workers. It is so complex. You know, when people think of a mashgiach, they think that he's just sitting on a chair and watching.
Right.
That's not the case. I mean, a truck comes in with ingredients. I mean, that has to be checked off. It's true that technology has helped. You know, a lot of that is now by computer. We know exactly. Kashrus agencies have less of a problem today than they had in the past, because a factory will put the same ingredients in every day. It'll go into the same machine, through the same pipes, and have the same result. But still, you know, you can't take it for granted. We've had very few, Baruch Hashem, I would say, aberrations or scandals within kashrus, because the kashrus agencies, they're not only up to the task, but they realize that the people that they are certifying for want it. They want this higher standard. So, you know, the mashgichim sometimes say in a restaurant, they say that sometimes people walk into the kitchen and compliment the chef. But they really should compliment the mashgiach.
It's so true.
Yeah.
So true. They're the foot soldiers who really are making it happen. And they're also, you know, they're unseen and very often unappreciated.
Unappreciated, and they work long hours at night.
And very often underpaid.
Come home. You know, I know someone who's a mashgiach doesn't come home till 1 o'clock in the morning every day, every night.
Wow.
So he didn't have to be a musician at a chasana to do that.
Right, true. And he's not getting paid as well as the musician, usually.
Baruch Hashem, I think thanks to the OU and the other kashrus agencies, compensation has gone up. The status of the mashgiach has gone
also
up.
Risen, right.
You know.
Now, we focused on a lot of the positives. From your experience, what could we be doing better in the kosher industry? From a kashrus standpoint, from a practical standpoint, what could we be doing better?
Well, I think the name of the game is to continue to produce products, because the consumer wants everything. Anything that can be made kosher, they want it to be made kosher. I think they need an assurance that the quality is up to par, that the hashgacha is up to par, very important. You know, the lifestyle that we have today, where a housewife might press for time, she has multiple kids to take care of, she runs into a supermarket, you can't ask her to be at the supermarket and start investigating everything. You know, they have to have confidence that the hashgachas that they do know, you know, are really at a very high level.
Right.
And that has actually happened.
That's very interesting. One final question for you, and that is in regard to the power of the kosher consumer. I know this is something you've written about, and this is something you've spoken about, and it's an important thing for viewers to know. The kosher consumer has power in terms of demanding quality, in terms of demanding kashrus, in terms of using their leverage as the buyer, as the one making the purchase, to make a difference. If you could advise the viewers of Let's Talk Kashrus what they could do to make a difference in the world of kosher, what would it be?
Well, I think the power that they have is they can demand the standards that they want. If you walk into a supermarket and you don't see a product that you really like, go over to the manager and say you would like to have this product.
And that makes a difference.
That makes a big difference. If you, for example, we had a company like Stella Dora, which suddenly put dairy, Kosherdotcom, into their cookies, and got, I don't know, within 24, 48 hours, 1,000 or something, they changed it.
Really?
They changed it.
I mean, what would Klal Yisrael do without the Strymel cookie? I mean, that would be a crisis.
Yeah, no. The kosher consumer has an enormous power. And any store manager, you know, they may sit pretty on a high stool in the store, but they know very well that it's that shopper that really determines their future.
Very interesting. Rabbi Lubinsky, it's a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for your contributions to Klal Yisrael in general, to the kosher industry in particular, and even more specifically to what you've done in raising the standards of kashrus. We really appreciate it. Thank you for your service, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.